summer. I'm really looking forward to this event with my friend and colleague, Nicole LeBlanc. This is being presented to you by both Women+Power as well as AESO and Amp It Up. If we could just move to the next slide, please. First off, we'd like to do land acknowledgement. We stand here today on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda Nation. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Next, please. So as everybody knows, we're doing Pathways in Power today. This is going to be really fun. We encourage everybody to ask questions in the chat throughout. We will get to them as we go, if not at the end of the session. This is going to be all about Nicole LeBlanc today, who I was fortunate enough to work with many years ago at the AESO. We're going to talk a little bit about her and her career and her journey to get to where she is today. So welcome, everybody. Please go to the next slide. So just a little bit about us. My name is Georgina Newell, also known as George. I sit on the Women+Power board with many other wonderful females and our one token male, Evan. We have been doing this for the last 4 years. It's really all about advocating for women in the utility sector. And as part of that, it's important for everyone to realize that currently women only represent a quarter of Alberta's power industry. So we are a community developed for women of all levels of experience. Some of us have been around a little bit longer than others, but we welcome everybody. And we also welcome men who support us as allies. At Women+Power, we're working together to address all the challenges that result in and from the underrepresentation of women in the industry by providing opportunities for members to connect with, support, inspire, and empower women to achieve their full potential, both professionally and personally. And we've done this through technical series, through networking events, as well as mentoring. So we look forward to meeting with all of you at some point in the future, and we welcome you today. Next slide, please. We're just going to kick it off. We can just go back. Thank you for sharing. Those are all of our current sponsors. We have different financial sponsors depending on the financial contribution that they've made, and we'd like to thank all of those, because if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do today. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of volunteers. Anyway, welcome, Nicole. I know that we've been looking forward to this event for the last, I'll say 3 months. I think maybe a little bit about you, given, you know, we've worked together over probably the last, I'll say 12, 13 years. And you've spent a lot of your time at the AESO. In that time, you've been in various positions. You've done a lot on the market side of things. Maybe let's talk a little bit about you, Nicole. Introduce yourselves to everybody, and then, you know, I'll turn it over.
Sounds good. And thanks. I want to, before I get into myself, I do want to thank George and Amp It Up and Women+Power for inviting me to be at this session and lead this event. I am really motivated by Women+Power's mission, and as those of you at the AESO know, very motivated in the Amp It Up mission, as I did help champion the development of that group. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to create space for women and all our important allies, men allies in the industry, to help lift each other up and learn from one another and grow together. And so I'm hopefully excited to share my story here today with all of you, and in the hopes that as I tell you a bit about myself and my experiences, everyone on the call, you can take away a little something that might be useful or resonate with you as you go through your own career and life journey.
Yeah, maybe we'll just pause there, Nicole, and if we go to the next slide, I would love for you and Suha to talk a little bit about the Amp It Up and what it means to the AESO and how this came to be.
Sure. Okay, I'll take a kick at that one. So my name is Suha Shahadi. This is a joint event between AmpItUp and Women+Power, and I have the pleasure to sit on both sides. I'm a board member with Women Plus, and I'm a member too with the AmpItUp ERG group at the AESO. So you might be wondering, what is AmpItUp? We're a utility company, so it's all about utility. So in the ERG group, it has a primary goal to develop an inclusive and diverse environment at the AESO to empower women. We have shared, of course, interest with the Women Plus, and we aim to establish a safe environment where we can share impactful stories. We can celebrate and recognize the unique experiences that we actually have as members, and most importantly, learn from each other. In AmpItUp, we believe that success lies in fostering meaningful connection, building those strong relationships, engaging and contributing to the success to one another. So Nicole is our guest speaker. She was one of the founders and the initiator of this ERG group at the AESO. And we're here today to hear her story and learn from her journey. I guess her story demonstrates that when we connect, we can ignite that spark and embark on an exciting journey of growth and empowerment and collective achievement as women. So I'll stop here and I'll pass it on to you, Nicole, if you want to add something to amp it up.
No, I think you covered it, Suha. It's definitely an awesome part of during the time that we were building it. One of the most at the time motivating parts of my job, and on certain days of really seeing the space that we're able to build, where members can come together and share and grow together. But George, I'll jump back into my introduction, or you guide me where you want me to go.
Yeah, please go ahead. I think there is one more slide if somebody flips to it, and then we can continue a little bit more about Nicole. So currently, Nicole is the Vice President of Markets for the Alberta Electric System Operator, and she's responsible for leadership of the AESO's market design and implementation, forecasting, market analytics, commercial procurement, and the AESO tariff. I know that sounds very daunting, but I'm sure Nicole can tell us all about it. You know, this is not only a fun session, but it can be also a technical learning session. And of course, you know, Nicole has spent nearly 20 years in this sector, and this is really so critical for her career, her contribution to the AESO, for all the things that she's been working in, you know, around forecasting, transmission planning, electricity market analysis and design, policy development, design, regulatory, and strategic business planning. And I don't think anybody can just jump into this. As most of you know, the utility sector is very complex and there's a lot of different moving parts. So it's important to be able to understand a lot of those different pieces in order to put all of these things together and be able to think strategically long-term about how we actually make it work. So since joining the AESO in 2006, Nicole spent many different times in various leadership roles. And we talked a little bit about all of the modeling and analytics that she's already done. She's contributed to numerous government policies, spearheaded market and tariff design files, and represented the AESO at regulatory proceedings in forecasting markets, tariff, and transmission planning. And if anybody has ever been part of regulatory proceedings, they're, I would say, not that fun. They're pretty intense. So we thank you, Nicole, for being part of that process. And if anybody has the I'll say the luck to be part of one of them in your own roles, you know, look to Nicole as one of your mentors and leaders for being there, because it's a bit of a tough process. We'd like to recognize her with all of what she's done lately. She was actually recognized by the Alberta government with the Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee Medal. Awesome, way to go, Nicole. We are very proud of you. You're very obviously deserving. And of course, you are committed to making the AESO a great place to work. I think we've heard a lot about that with the Amp It Up program that's been at the AESO. And then since then, obviously, our partnership with Women+Power. Prior to joining the AESO, Nicole worked as an economist at the Canadian Energy Research Institute, and she also holds a Master of Arts in Economics and a Bachelor of Science in Applied Math from the University of Calgary. When taking a break, she and her husband spend some time outdoors. I know she is from close to Jasper, so what does that mean? That means you definitely spend a lot of time outside and enjoying all of Alberta's wonderful outdoors that we have to offer. So welcome, Nicole. And now I'll turn it over to you, please.
Thanks, George. Yeah, seeing it all on paper, there is a fair bit that I've been getting up to in there, and beyond. I guess my summary of the CV. I would want to walk you through a bit of who am I, where did I come from, how did I get here, and what have I learned along the way to kick us off before we turn it over to questions and areas people may want to explore. So as you know, as it highlights, I recently took on the new role of VP of Markets at the AESO at the start of this year. So the session is really highlighting an executive's journey, and I think the best I can talk to right now is the journey that I took to get here. I don't think I'm just getting my feet wet. It'll have to be a couple of years from now before I speak to my experience as an executive, but it's been pretty fast-paced and interesting so far. There's a tremendous amount of change happening within the electricity sector, and my portfolio that I lead at the AESO touches almost all of it. And it's exciting to be at the AESO. We're central to so much of the change, and we have a very important role in guiding where the industry goes. And as you said, George, would you mind if we stopped sharing the screen so I don't have to look at a picture of myself for much longer? My career experience at the AESO, it's been mainly at the AESO. So I've spent the majority of my career working for the system operator, and when I joined, many people have heard this story before. I joined with the expectation that I'd be here for about 2 years, get some experience, and then move on to an industry player. But it's just remained so dynamic and fascinating that there's never a shortage of something to learn or a new project to take on or a new challenge to tackle. That as I look back, it's been almost 16, 17 years that I've been here, and now leading a core central piece of the organization. My background, as you mentioned, it's in mathematics and economics, so that does give me a bit of a technical bent in some of the highly technical work that we do. Where did I come from? As you mentioned, I grew up in a small town in Alberta, northern Alberta, just near Jasper. It's called Hinton. And my parents, in kind of coming from a smaller town, I came to Calgary to go to university without really, I think, any well-laid plan or a grand design of what my life or career would look like. And I don't think that's all that uncommon. But coming from a smaller town, that there is a whole bunch of things that you have to learn about going to university, living in a city, maneuvering downtowns, things like that, that was a great time of life to explore and learn new challenges. But the other part about coming from rural Alberta and working at the system operator with our public interest lens, I think it does give me a view of, as we talk about building transmission lines across parts of the province, or thinking about different sectors that are impacted by how some of our rules or policies can guide industry impacts or impacts to rural towns. I guess it's a bit more personal for me. I can put myself in those people's shoes, and that's something that I guess bring forward in my day-to-day. As I mentioned, I didn't have a grand plan in my life of a career that I would be working towards. I think it was more at the core. I like to work hard. I like to learn new things. I do have a strong, I care for the people that I work with, or the people that I'm leading, and really focus on delivering what I say I will. And in the core of that, I think that's really been the key to my success, because in all the various stages of my life, it's opened up new opportunities, new projects to take on, or new groups and people to lead. And that's how, I guess, how I got here, really relying on building up skills around how to be an inspiring leader, how to think strategically, prioritize both for work that we're working on, as well as in my personal life, and how to make sure that you're balancing both. And sometimes the balance is not in line, but you got to make sure over the long run it gets there. And then a bit of being assertive, going after what I want, but doing in a way with strong emotional intelligence, so that I'm maintaining good relationships and strong team bonds as I go. What have I learned along the way? I think a couple key ones that I may have already touched on a bit, but really hitting it home for me. Even from the very earliest days of your career, you're building your personal brand. And this industry, as we talk about, is small, and you interact with people at certain points in your career, and you have no idea when you're going to interact with them again. It could be that you're on the other side of the table with them in a negotiation. You become their boss, they become your boss. It happens in a whole range of ways. And so there's an aspect of making sure that you build up a positive reputation for yourself, and you protect that, because that is really your major currency. And you do that in the smallest day-to-day interactions, and then in those more bigger challenging files, or those might be bigger, more front-facing opportunities. And you got to make sure you stay true to yourself in there. The other big one that I think I learned more later on in my career is knowing yourself, or knowing what you want. I think early in my career, I might have felt like I was in a competition with people, but I'm not really sure what I was competing for, or if I really wanted it. But it was just, that's what you're supposed to try and aspire for more. And then as you go through it, or as I went through it, I realized, well, do I even want some of these things that I'm supposedly working for? And a lot of self-reflection to figure out, well, what do I value, and how do I make sure the work that I'm doing aligns with those values? Because ultimately that's going to be your greatest motivator. And then my third one, before I pass it over to you, George, is once I had a place of, I guess, authority or influence, it was realizing, and maybe this came with age and wisdom, that I needed to use that for greater purpose. I needed to step up for people in ways that maybe they wouldn't be able to step up for themselves. Try and make, well, it's maybe at the highest level, try and make the world a better place. It's more, try and make what I can control, the where we work, a better place. Make sure that people feel empowered, that they're growing. If there are situations where there's toxic behavior or bullying happening, that I use whatever authority or influence I have to where somebody might not have that same level of ability, to try and change that culture, change that activity. Because at the end of the day, there's all the files and the work that I'll work on, and that will get accomplished. The part circling back to my brand, I guess, or what I value, is more people saying, well, she did work hard to make this a better place to work. It was better because she was there. And ultimately that hits on my values, that hits on the brand I'm trying to build, and the leader I want to be. So
Thanks, Nicole. That's fantastic. And, a couple things came to mind for me. I look at us today, and we can still pick up the phone and call each other, even though it was, I haven't been at the AESO since 2010. So that says a lot. That says a lot about your person, and that says a lot about how you've managed to influence over your career. So I think, thinking about it from that perspective, who have you looked to be an ally or a mentor? Has there been multiple people? Has there been one person in particular that's really gone to bat for you? Because I think that's really important for any of us, is finding that ally, finding that mentor, because that can be the difference between having a successful career and not being happy where you are. Any comments and thoughts on that, Nicole?
Yeah, many. I think I have had many coaches, many allies, mentors, sponsors throughout my career. Definitely not just one. They vary, and they also change as you grow in your career. Kind of breaking them down of how I see them different. And I don't know if there might be better defined terms, but for me, a mentor is someone that is has experience to share with you in a way that it's that sharing of experience that brings the value. And I've had a range of mentors throughout my career. And as I said, in the early days of my career, I realized there was points in time when I outgrew a mentor and I had to move on and find the next one, because the experience that they shared with me was not going to hit that sort of next level of leadership that I was going to need as a mentor. I've had, I'd say, sponsors as well, really strong sponsors, people that had influence and authority, we'll say above me, that took a risk. They had trusted that the brand I built would help them in achieving something, and took a risk and put me forward sponsored me for a role, an opportunity, a project, in a whole number of occasions. And there's a part of, you need to find out who those people are and build strong relationships with them and give them that trust that they should take that risk on you. But that also comes back for me to that. But if you stay true to your word, deliver on what you commit to, really have that positive branding or reputation, it's easier for them to do that for you. And then coaches get more into really helping you build through your thinking and get to that next level, not in the way a mentor would tell you of here's my experience of exactly what I did when that happened, or here's how we'd maneuver it, or here's how I'd maneuver through it. But coaches are more that helping you dig out deeper answers than you even could have gotten to on your own. And I've had throughout my career many good coaches too. I've also had a couple places where a boss that wasn't you'd say wasn't great, but there's an opportunity to learn in that situation as well. My situation, it was the individual was very focused on building their reputation, moving their career forward without a ton of interest in the work that we were doing. But that created the space of, well, I got to then lead the work and guide it and sort of fast track some of my development by sort of filling the gap they were leaving for me. Before we go away from it, I think one other thing I want to share is probably about 8 years ago, I realized I probably have, this sounds silly, I probably have some experience I could share with other people. I should reach out and see if they're interested in hearing more. And I, made the very subtle comment to some lady that I worked with of like, hey, we were going through an organizational change at the time. And I said, like, hey, we're going through some change here. You want to go for coffee? I could chat with you about opportunities that I see of how you might want to maneuver through this. And she was just like, so thankful that I reached out, and I've been dying to ask you to go for coffee for so long, and I just could never grow up the courage. And then we went for coffee, and it's like I had so much experience to share with her that I could easily provide, and it also really filled me up. And the moral of the story there is, not only should you be looking for your own sponsors and mentors and allies, but also be looking for who could you be a mentor to, who can you be a coach to, because there's tremendous internal growth that you can get from that by realizing what you have to offer, realizing what experiences you already have, and verbalizing that can, for me, it was a way that really built up my confidence.
And I think that's a really great point, Nicole. I think anybody at any level can mentor or coach. It doesn't matter. It can be lateral, it can be up, it can be down. And I think back to your point about, having challenging bosses versus inspiring bosses, there are really important lessons to learn from both. And how you take that forward is what makes you a bigger, stronger person, and what you do with the information. I think that leads me to my next question. Given your background and given, how technical you are, at what point was there a pivotal moment when you decided, I don't want to be a subject matter expert anymore. I want to actually lead. I want to manage people. I want to coach. I want to guide. And if so, when was that? And how did you do it? Because I believe there's probably a lot of people on the call who might be a subject matter expert today. And how do they make the step to moving into that next position of supervising others, managing others?
So I think the earliest, or maybe the first time I felt that was quite early in my career at the AESO. I'd maybe been here about a year and a half. I was hired in to build up a function of the business that didn't exist at that point in time. So there was kind of in that, there's that inherent ability to build. We were building something, and we needed more support. So my boss at the time hired a second analyst to help build out the tools and the models that we were working on. And from I guess the day that person started, I didn't look to my boss to tell them what they should be doing. Inherently, it was like, well, I've been working on this and I know what we need help with. So at this point in time, I'm going to be guiding that other individual through that work and helping them get the resources and the experience and the knowledge that they need to do that. And then ultimately, like, reviewing the work product that they created, giving feedback on it. That was my unique circumstances. And maybe it was like the prime conditions, because it was a bit of, I was there, I had experience, a little bit more seniority. We were building something, my leader gave the space and I just ran with it. It might also be a little bit inherent in my personality. You have that friend in the group that likes to help plan things and take charge, and they make the bookings and then tell you where to be so that you can go have some fun. That's me in my group. So there's a bit of like, I'm gonna put my arms around this and make it go. The next, I'd say, and that continued on for a number of years, where I was managing people. The team got larger, the projects got a bit more expansive, but it was probably 10 years later when the AESO was working on the capacity market, where I was put in charge of leading a big, like a new piece of one of the three main pillars of the capacity market design, where there was no roadmap or manual of how we were going to do this. It was all being built brand new, and it was huge, and we had to do it fast, and it was complex. And it was that point in time when I realized, or I was able to pull a team together. Half of them are probably listening to this call right now. Pull a team together, lay out a vision of what we were trying to get to. They were experienced technical people, and I was able to just give them enough information of where we were trying to go, enough confidence and support and resources, that they then just like flew with it. And we were able to build something that was so significant, and it was a different kind of leadership, and it probably took me 2 years to realize how great it was. It wasn't me managing those deliverables, it was just creating the space for people to excel. And that, yeah, what changed between there? Again, an opportunity, confidence to step into it, and I guess that management experience that I had gained over time of how do you inspire people individually? How do you make sure you have the technical capabilities that you're going to need to deliver? Sort of how do you build that team? Those would have been the foundational pieces that kind of helped me step to that next level. And then, yeah, in a few years, I'll look back to where I am right now and tell you what I'm learning, but I don't know just yet.
And your learning journey will never stop, no matter what
No.
position you're in. And that's what's so, exciting and fun. So I think back to, some of the things that you've talked about, and thinking about how much time you've been at the ISO, I think if we can shift a little bit to culture and amp it up is an important piece of this. But how have you seen the culture in your organization and how you have influenced it over, your time there, and how it has changed so that it has been maybe moved from this more, I'll say, directive type organization to this more collaborative team where you have to rely on everybody to come together because not one person can do it on their own. Because to your point, there is no roadmap. So how do you think that's evolved over the last, say, 10 years? And, what has been a big part of it for you?
That's a great question, George. I think there's probably a number of aspects. Necessity is one, where there's just such a significant amount of change and new things happening on our system that decentralizing decision making, empowering people to really think curiously about what they're doing and empower them to make recommendations. Part of that I think has been, well, there is no way that one person could one or a central leadership body could do this because it is so complex and so much change happening. I think there's also some strong leaders at the ISO that I benefited from working with, that really their leadership style, Mike Law himself, Miranda, Keating Erickson, Pauline McLean. I think those are all three coaching type leaders where they set out a vision of where we're trying to go to, and then look to empower their people to make it happen. And we've been benefiting across the organization in doing that. And then I think as an industry, we struggle with, well, there's a utility mindset of conservatism that's guided by reliability is paramount. And if you move too fast, we might cause an issue on the system. And that is ultimately what we are all trying to avoid. We're all trying to maintain reliability at the end of the day. So there's almost ingrained in our overall industry's culture conservatism as to how we move. And so trying to evolve that to a place of innovation and risk taking, I think that's a journey that we've been on for 20 years, and we're probably still going to be on it for another 10, 15.
If not longer, so I'll make a small joke here, but it's kind of like the line lost file for all of you that know that it just never goes away. It's been around forever and it will be around forever. So there's always going to be challenges in our industry that we have to continue to develop and figure out better ways to do things. So maybe if we were to think sort of philosophically, what advice would you give yourself now when you're coming out of university? What thing would you tell your 22-year-old self?
That it's okay to not know exactly where you're going or what you're working towards. Just make sure you're still having fun while you're figuring that out. And I sometimes describe my career, and maybe I should stop given the role that I'm in now, is well, I'm just kind of stumbling along here. I don't know I don't know what the secrets to success are, but here I am. And that's maybe flippant, because at the core it comes back to what I shared of like, well, no, I've worked hard. I've made sure to hold up to my values, and with that I've built a reputation that I'm proud of, and that at the end of the day maybe is my view of what success is. But there's a point in time where I think I put a lot of weight on my shoulders of, well, what am I trying to achieve? Where am I working towards? What is my long-term goal? And it almost got me into like a circular place of, well, how do I know this is what I want if I don't have that longer term vision? And ultimately I got to a place of, well, if I'm happy, then what's the worst that could happen? So that's what I would tell 22-year-old Nicole. Hope I didn't lose you, or did you lose me? Oh, good.
I'm back. I think that, all of these things are really important, and it's important for everybody to hear some of your, I'll say, challenges, because it's not easy and you always have to continue working, and there's always things you're going to be learning. It's not like you ever get to a point where you know everything. And I think that's important for all of us at whatever point you're in at your career, whether it's 5 years in, where it's 20 years in. It's having a really open mind to learning things new and understanding that you can learn from everybody around you. And I think that really goes into being that person like yourself, Nicole, where people feel comfortable, they feel supported by you. And I think, I don't know how many people are in the call that maybe work for you, Nicole, but what would they say about you and your leadership style? And feel free to put something in the chat if you like, if you're
Well, I
out
know
there.
there's a bunch of them in a room or across the floor, so I could just walk over and we could do a little interview clip, but I won't do that.
We won't put everybody on the spot, but we do have a question in the chat. Do you have any top leadership career life books or podcasts that you would recommend?
Oh, well, so for those that know me, I'm always reading about 3 books at a time. And so the list is too long to give you a top 3. And it depends on where you, as you said, where you are in your career and what you need um, at that point in time. Maybe what I would say is, I benefited, not everyone, but I benefited from reading almost everything I could get my hands on, and you take away what you will at that point in time, but it can help you with technical leadership skills. It can help you with a lot of internal, what am I valuing? What am I prioritizing? What am I looking for out of life, and does it match up? And then maybe some of the skills that we all use that maybe feel like common sense, but we don't, putting words to them helps put structure to it, like change management and 7 habits for highly people, and communication styles or communication skills or emotional intelligence. Those things, they help put the framework in your mind so you can, I guess maybe for me, it's been that framework helps me feel, gives me a structure that then I can apply the thinking, the leadership thinking, in a bit more of a cohesive way.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic. And I think there's so many options out there, and it's just, even listening to a few TED Talks sometimes can be inspiring, and you can take one thing away, and sometimes that's enough. We've got lots of questions in the chat, so I'll move to the next one. So do you consider yourself to be a courageous leader? I think you are, or is that something you're striving for? Maybe some examples of when you've tried to be courageous, and what gives you courage.
yeah, I think it's probably only been in the last 3 or 4 years that I finally started seeing myself as a courageous leader. And that might be matched with, for a long time, I felt, this might be a confidence thing for myself, of like, I would only jump into something if I had a real, like, there was a 85% chance it was going to be successful. Who am I kidding? It was probably a 95% chance that it was going to be successful. So taking leaps, like, it might have looked like I was taking leaps, but in my mind, they were well calculated steps that I thought I could be successful in. And only in the past few years has it gotten more of like, from the perspective of, well, what is there to lose? One of the, I think, courageous steps in it, and it was an internal turmoil that I had to go through, was championing Amp It Up at the AESO. It was the first employee resource group. It was pushing culture change at the organization. And there is a lot about thinking about, well, what about, how will people view this group? How will they view me by putting up this group? Will they, what kind of negative connotations could come with that? And ultimately I got to that place of, well, I have the authority in the organization, and I guess the influence with my reputation, and then a part of my value of like, well, do I really care about what those people think? And ultimately is more, I care more about the people that are going to benefit from this group and the company as a whole is we're going to make some culture change. And so for me, that was, I guess, a turmoil I went through before I took this, that step forward. That it required that I have courage and be brave and face potential consequences, but it was important enough for me to step up to it. I see that it was Jillian that asked the question, and so there's lots of I think emotions flowing these days. Where you talked about regulatory proceedings in my introduction, George, and so this time last year, I was in the hearing of all hearings that I hope I'm ever in my career, the Balkan Regional Proceeding, and we were moving forward a file that was controversial. There was a lot to lose, a lot of people that the file, the ISO that myself would be making unhappy. Note there, people pleaser. Anyways, when I look back now, I don't think I realized how much courage it took to get there, but I was supported by a strong team, both up and down. The people working with me on the team, they're very qualified, smart people. We had a good case, we'll say, and then leadership from above, kind of making sure that I had the guidance and their support. And so there's some courage in that, but I'm going to pivot way sideways to, with courage, you have to also recognize that sometimes things won't go as you envisioned or as you hoped. And recovering might be the right word, dealing with the decision where the full filing that we put forward was denied. That was really hard. That was a lot of time and effort and kind of personal passion put into that file. And the initial reactions are, you go through, we talked about the 7 stages of grief that you go through, and you cycle through them a couple times. Obviously it's just a tariff filing, but it's still a lot of your day to day. And I'm not a sports fan, but I know someone who's a serious basketball fan, and they shared a clip recently on some internal sites at the ISO that talks, and they were interviewing, I guess, what is like the best basketball player in the world, and they'd lost the championship, and he was being interviewed, and someone said, well, do you feel like a failure since you lost this championship? And the basketball player's response was just perfect. Of like, it wasn't this, but like, I'm the best basketball player in the world. How come you're calling me a failure because I lost one championship? And I took a lot away from that, because there's a whole lot that back to, what do I value? What reputation do I want people to or what reputation do I want to build? What do I want to leave people with? And ultimately, it's a lot more than just what any one regulatory filing application can result in. And so that was a good learning of, there's only so much I can control. What do I value, and make sure that those two pieces are being held really high.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, if you were to summarize that succinctly, it's like all great people fail, and it's okay. We're all great. We will all fail, and you take the lessons and you move on.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're a failure.
Exactly. It does not mean that you are a failure by any means. And maybe that brings us perfectly into the next question about, have you ever found yourself in a slump or a low point, and how do you fight back? And we've all been there. For everybody that's on the call today, I'm sure we all have a story. Feel free to throw something in the chat of how you came back. Maybe you got a puppy, that's all you needed. Maybe you bought some chocolate and that's all you needed. But is there anything that comes to mind for you, Nicole?
Well, you have to get good at recognizing it so that you can take action before you're in it. That's a bit of get clear on what fills you up and what drains you. And so through my many years of working, I guess I think I've figured out my balance of how can I, where is it that I can give so much before it's gonna take a toll on me, and when do I need to pull back? And it's important to prioritize that pulling back. Because at the end of the day, your health, your mental health, your physical health, your ability to be there for your friends and your family and those that you love, that's all the ultimate most important part, not any particular file that you're working on for your role. That will get managed and covered. That's your boss's job. The so being able to identify it, and then what I've identified is, and maybe this is highlights what I've identified is what can fill me up is helping people grow in their careers, hearing about what are the challenges, being a mentor to as many people as I can, being a coach, and I find that really fills me up because it's a view of, well, I'm helping them and I'm also learning a lot about myself as I do it. The other, I guess, example that I would say, I've been fortunate. My slumps have been short enough that something changed. Like I've stayed at the AESO, I've changed roles, but I've stayed at the same company. So it's always like I've been in them, and then something changed. A new project came in. There was a new dynamic in the team. I got a new leader, and yeah, as I say that, maybe I sought those things out. I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, we all deal with the ebbs and flows in our careers, whether it's personal as well as professional. But you know, there are ways, and we can gain resilience as a result of it. So, you know, sometimes there's lessons to be learned and shared with others, and that can be done through coaching or mentoring. Just wanted to do a little shout out kudos from one person on the chat. So Nicole was a great mentor to me at the time I was at the AESO. She was an empowering leader that truly cared about the people around her. So you know what? That's amazing. I think that says so much right there.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks, Shaheen. I think I wanna throw back though that um, Shaheen's story was pretty powerful. Shaheen taught me a lot about my own personal privilege that I didn't really realize or know before. I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you a bit of your story, Shaheen. I hope that's okay. Shaheen's from Iran, and she moved to Canada on her own to come get seek out a better life, and she came to Calgary, got a PhD in a really hard physics. I think it's astrophysics, and then came and worked at the AESO and taught me so much about many privileges that I had in my life as a child and even as an adult going to university, that freedoms that I took for granted, that in other places of the world, women are fighting for them. And it besides, I guess it goes both ways, is the comments that I'd share for Shaheen.
yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Next question. How do you approach making difficult decisions in your career and in leadership? Are there any strategies you would recommend?
I do lots of fretting. I wouldn't recommend that. I also like to read a lot, so often it's kind of finding a bit of a self-help book at the time of the challenge that I'm facing, and hopefully that can give me some tools or techniques or just a structure to think it through. And then there's talking to your inner circle, the people that you trust, that are not your leaders, not going to be your future leaders, people that have your best interest at heart. And this group of people is really important to have throughout your career, and you got to pick them wisely, treat them kindly, and respect them, and then be able to go to them when you need to. But ultimately, you have to make your own decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is knowing that you're not alone and you've got a team of people that you can rely on, as well as maybe even just use as a sounding board. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important. It's really important for all of us to have a sounding board, you know, I'll call it the judgment-free zone. But it's important.
The ones that are going to support you no matter what decision you make, they're They may give you their opinions about what they think you should do, but they're also there to listen or add considerations that you might not have had. The people that when you're feeling stressed out and your brain chemicals are running at the best way they can, they kind of bring you back.
Yeah, perfect. Next question is just around how do you break into the energy sector in Alberta? Is there any advice that you have? Networking, one word,
Come
networking.
join the forecasting and analytics team. You can get a view of the entire industry in one stop. But
See,
yes,
there you go.
Networking's a good answer too. We can only hire so many people into the team. There's my bias coming through. That's where I started. I'd say find any role and then be curious and deliver on what's being asked of you and take on more, and you can have a pretty lengthy career doing interesting things in this industry.
Stick with Women in Power. Also, use it as an opportunity to network. Come join us at any of our in-person events. It's a really great way to meet people. Next question. This just starts with a big thank you, Nicole, for sharing your career journey and advice. I'm curious, what's some common challenges or themes you've seen from some of what your mentees, I guess, face, and what skills do you see as most helpful for them to overcome those challenges? Is there a common trend that you see that when you're talking to some of the people that you might be mentoring?
I think, and this might get to the relationships that I have, the people I'm mentoring, the relationships I'm having, but there's a lot of place where it's just helping people see themselves in the way others do. And I think this is a common theme that comes up in women empowerment groups, is that sometimes women have a hard time seeing themselves as confidently as they should. And it's that external validation from a mentor or a mentee that helps see that that is the right track, and you should helping to kind of highlight successes. That's something that I think comes up as a theme often, and that comes in many different spaces of if it's a kind of somebody dealing with a leadership challenge or hiring challenge or project or new taking on new skills, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, if everything else fails, it's authenticity goes a long way. And, people are often so much more comfortable when they know that people are being genuine and that you can share. So, if I were to impart some advice as Nicole and I are sort of walking through this journey together, it's really important as a leader to make sure that you are vulnerable and that if you want people to share, you need to probably share first. And that is one step in moving forward to really bridging some great relationships and beginning sort of that really strong bond of having a great team. Because if people aren't sharing and people aren't being authentic and even showing vulnerability, it's really hard to become really successful as a team. So that's maybe my words of wisdom for the day.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good way to sum up the evolution. You asked me that question of like, how has the AESO's culture changed? And I think that's a good summary of how that, and maybe that's common among many companies and organizations, but that feels like how it's changed. It shifted from very analytical work focus to, and that's one thing I really appreciate about my career at the AESO is about 10 years ago, we hired a new knowledge development director, and she really shifted the learning programs at the AESO to be focused on building up the whole person. It wasn't about just what are your technical skills and how do we help you foster those, but more getting into what are your values, what inspires you, how do others see you, how do you apply emotional intelligence, and those types of activities, they teach you as much for just who you are as a person as to how do you do your work.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple minutes left. Please feel free to throw your questions if there's any others in the chat. I think I have gone through all of the ones that are there, but I would like to say thanks, Nicole, for your authenticity and vulnerability.
Uh-oh. Can everyone still hear me, or did we just lose George?
Still here. I'm still here.
Well, thanks. I opened up with thanks for the invitation. I tapped Gaz on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'd like to do something for Amp It Up." And then I heard, "Oh, well, we've been trying to merge Amp It Up and Women in Power." So I'm glad that I've been able to be here and support both of those groups' missions, which I am highly motivated by. And my time is a bit tight these days, but if at any point there's somebody out there that thinks there's something I can help them with, let me know.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Nicole. And if there are no other questions, then maybe we'll adjourn the session. Thank you so much. Everyone have a fantastic afternoon.
Bye-bye.